Hi everyone, this is Caly. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited to share today's card. I'm using the Paint Your World collection from Spellbinders. There are actually 6 products in this collection, 2 more brush die sets, as well as an artistic palette die set as well. It's so much fun. I just had to practice some self-restraint and only allow myself 2 sets so that I can use to make this card for today. We're going to start first by creating our background. I wanted a watercolor, splashy, painty background. So I'm using some Distress Oxides. These colors here are Abandoned Coral and Worn Lipstick. And again, that's Distress Oxide. I'm just going to spray some water onto it to wet the pigment, and then we'll go ahead and just add some color to our background. And I want to concentrate the color right here where I want my brush to be. And then we're going to do some ink smushing. I just have some cellophane here that I previously cut for some Infinity Shaker cards, and I'm just going to use it to go ahead and smush some ink on. It just creates some fun splattering in the background. It's organic and you can't really control it. I want it to be a little softer, so I did spray some water on it, and we're gonna let it drip a little bit. You can set this aside to dry naturally on its own. I'm just gonna heat set it a little bit just to stop the movement of the colors. So once I'm happy with that, I'm gonna go ahead and set it aside and let it dry the rest of the way on its own. Now we're ready for some die cutting. I've got the 2 sets here, and I want to show you a side by side so that you can see for yourself the main differences. The brushes are the same size, so you can use the accessories interchangeably on your card. And I wanted to point out also that the bristles dies are exactly the same. I've die cut the brush handle that I want to use in cream cardstock, and now I'm applying some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink just around the edges to give some color and dimension and shading to my brush. For the hardware on this brush, I went ahead and die cut those parts with some matte silver cardstock. And I'll go ahead and just apply and piece that together. Then we'll set it aside to work on the bristles. I've die cut 4. Again, they're exactly the same. So we'll go ahead and add some interest by ink blending a little bit for some shading and dimension. For 2 of them, I'll ink blend the bottom of the bristles, and the other 2, I'll ink blend the top. It really creates some extra interest to see the lighter and darker shades. So I'll flip that brush over and apply some double-sided adhesive. Then I'll take the 2 where I blended the bottom first and adhere those first. And then I'll do the same. I'll apply some more double-sided adhesive, then adhere the other 2 bristles that I ink blended at the top. I don't know if you can see it, but for this second layer of bristles, I'm going to offset it just a tad so that you can still see it poking through from the ones in front. So as you can see there, the different shades that you added with that ink blending really create some shadow and some depth to those bristles. I also die cut some bristles in gold glitter cardstock, and you see here I'm trimming them so that I can move the bristles opposite of one another before adhering it down for some extra interest. So you can see it poking through those holes from the first 2 layers of the bristles. So now our brush is done. We're going to go ahead and ink blend all the different accessories that come between the 2 die sets that I'm using today. And I'm just adding additional color to this pink panel of paint splatters, I guess you'd say. And I'm adding some Abandoned Coral as well to deepen the colors at the top where the paint drippage is. This piece is going to go right underneath the bristles there to give our card lots of interest. And so we're going to go ahead now and work on some blooms. This is the Mini Blooms and Sprigs set. So I've already pre-die cut all of the pieces, and I'm using the same pink cardstock on most of it. I'll introduce a bit of white and just a splash of purple, but for the most part, we're going to have this monochromatic pink. I'm using residual ink from my brush from the previous ink blending now and just applying color at the center of those flowers and the center of these butterfly bodies. And when I run out of ink, I'll add a little bit more, but just a tad so that it's not overwhelming and too harsh. I'll do the same with the other flowers that I'm going to use. And now we're going to use some Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink to add some ink and color to the leaves and foliage that I die cut from this Mini Blooms and Sprigs die set. Now that everything is prepared and ink blended for dimension, we're going to go ahead and piece it all together. I've added a dab of glue at the center of all of the flowers, and on these white flowers you can make them 2 individual flowers, but I've stacked them for some extra dimension. Then I'll add the flower centers that I die cut in matte gold cardstock. And then next up, we'll work on the butterflies. On this one, I'm just layering it and backing it over some gold glitter cardstock, and I've also die cut the bodies in gold glitter cardstock. Last but not least, we'll work on this little sprig here with the little purple berries. All right, so now all of my elements are put together and we're ready to put our card together. So I've gotten my watercolor background panel back here. I'm going to go ahead and trim off a 1/4 inch all around. So that's just an 1/8 inch off each side. And that just gives my card a little mat, and I like mats around my cards. I've also die cut some foliage stems there in vellum, and that'll just give my card a little bit more interest. And before adhering down the paint splatters and the brush, I'm going to go ahead and play with the layout and make sure there's plenty of space. And then I'll adhere that paint splatter down first with some liquid adhesive, and then I'll add foam adhesive to my brush, and then I'll apply that and adhere it with an overlap over that paint splatter. Okay, so now we'll work on the flowers. In general, I like to place my flowers first, because that's going to be your focal point, with foam adhesive. And then I'll add the stems and foliage around that, tucking the leaves and foliage down under behind those flowers to hide the stems. And I'll go ahead and do that all the way around, creating a nice and even floral spray. Then I'll use the smaller leaves to fill in all of the open areas and hide any stems that are showing or any imperfections that you want to hide. Now for the butterflies, I'm going to go ahead and flare up their wings just a tad and apply the glue only to the centers of the bodies. I want the wings to stay flared up, and that just gives our die cut elements a bit more body and interest. So I'll finish doing that with my butterflies, and then last but not least, we'll go ahead and create a sentiment. I'm going to stamp and emboss a sentiment from the Paint Your World Sentiments set. I want to choose one that's going to fit right into that spot. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare a black piece of cardstock with an anti-static embossing powder tool. I stamped that sentiment with some Versamark ink. Now I'm going to apply some white embossing powder, shake off that excess embossing powder, and then heat set that for a nice and crisp sentiment. You can create a banner out of your sentiment strip or however you like it. I like to fussy cut around the letters. I really prefer this look, and I don't mind fussy cutting. So I've attached some foam tape, and I'm going to use my T-ruler to go ahead and apply that and make sure that my sentiment is straight. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and apply this to a card base with some dot runner adhesive, and then that finishes my card. If you're interested in the products that I used for this project, be sure to check out the links in the descriptions below, as everything will be linked for your convenience. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye everyone!